We spend so much of life chasing a version of ourselves that feels complete, perfect, and finally healed. But real growth doesn't end in a finish line. It unfolds like a spiral, returning again and again to deeper layers of who you are. Individuation isn't about becoming someone else. It's about reclaiming the scattered parts of your psyche and learning to live with your full truth. It's a lifelong dialogue with the unconscious, a path that requires patience, humility, and deep courage. You don't arrive at the self, you become it, slowly through confrontation, integration, and transformation. In a world obsessed with quick fixes, individuation invites you to walk the long road home. The truth is, every season of life reveals a new part of you. You're not broken for evolving, you're becoming, again and again. We often imagine finding ourselves as a single powerful moment of awakening, a breakthrough where everything suddenly becomes clear. But this is a fantasy. The true self doesn't reveal itself all at once, and it never conforms to a fixed identity. It comes through in fragments, in glimpses, in symbols, in dreams. It unfolds across time like peeling back the layers of an onion. What you thought was your truth a year ago may feel shallow now. This doesn't mean you were wrong. It means you were at one layer of your becoming. The self is revealed not by discovery, but by revelation over time. And every layer you uncover requires the death of the previous identity you clung to for safety. What we miss is that the parts of ourselves we buried long ago, shame, anger, longing, creativity, don't vanish, they wait. And as life forces us to confront new challenges, those layers rise to the surface, demanding to be seen, heard, and integrated. This is why individuation, the psychological and spiritual process of becoming who you truly are, is never linear. You don't climb one ladder and arrive. You descend and return, again and again, each time facing the parts of yourself you were once too afraid to meet. In early adulthood, for example, we may identify heavily with external achievements, our career, relationships, or social image. These become masks we wear, layers of identity that protect us from confronting the uncertainty underneath. But as time passes, life has a way of stripping away what is no longer real. A breakup, a job loss, a betrayal, they crack the surface, and from within those cracks a deeper truth begins to emerge. You begin to ask questions you've avoided for years. Who am I without this role? What matters when everything I counted on disappears? That's when the next layer reveals itself. You might rediscover an inner artist you buried under practicality, or you might meet a wounded child inside you still waiting for someone to listen. These aren't new parts of you. They've always been there, hidden beneath who you thought you had to be, but they only come forward when you're finally ready to feel the pain, the uncertainty, the vulnerability that comes with shedding another skin. This layered unfolding doesn't mean you're broken or inconsistent. It means you're alive. It means you're growing. In fact, the very nature of the psyche is such that it protects you until you're ready. The unconscious doesn't dump everything on you at once. It gives you what you can handle when you can handle it, and as you build capacity, more is revealed. But here's the catch. Every time you access a deeper part of yourself, you also lose something. You lose the comfort of an old identity. You lose the clarity that came with black and white thinking, and you step into the chaos of not knowing. This is why many people stop growing. It's easier to cling to a false self than to keep meeting the unfamiliar within. Yet if you can endure that discomfort, if you can sit with the confusion, something miraculous happens. You start to see that the self is not a single answer or identity. It's a living, breathing mystery that reveals itself through your willingness to go deeper. And each time you shed an old skin, you don't become less, you become more real, more whole, more human. The mistake people make is thinking that they will one day arrive, that they'll hit some inner milestone, and finally know who they are. But true individuation is not about arrival, it's about depth. You might spend years thinking you've healed a pattern, only to find it resurface in a new form. That doesn't mean you failed, it means another layer just opened. You see, the unconscious is layered too. It doesn't give you all your shadow at once. It sends signals, dreams, triggers, projections, like breadcrumbs guiding you back to lost parts of yourself. If you follow them, you'll discover that the self is not a finished product. It's a lifelong unfolding. So stop asking who am I really as if it's a question with one answer. Ask instead, what part of me is emerging now? Because the self you'll meet at 40 will not be the same as the one at 25, and that's not a failure of identity, that's the evolution of soul. In the end, the self is revealed not by forcing it into a box but by allowing it to speak in its own time, in its own voice. Your only job is to stay open, to listen, to follow the thread, no matter where it leads, because every layer you meet takes you one step closer, not to a final destination, but to a deeper, fuller, more meaningful experience of who you are becoming. A life crisis doesn't arrive to destroy you, it arrives to awaken you, but most of us don't see it that way. We panic, we fight it, we try to hold on to the life that's falling apart. We ask, why is this happening to me? Instead of what is this trying to reveal? And in that resistance, we miss the deeper invitation, because every breakdown, every betrayal, every moment when the life you built starts to crumble, is a call to go inward, a call to deepen the process of individuation, a call to become more real, not less. At first, a crisis looks like chaos. Your plans fail, relationships fall apart, your sense of self collapses. But this collapse is not the end. It's the stripping away of everything that no longer serves your growth. It's the destruction of the false self. And in that collapse lies your chance to rebuild from truth, not fear. Life isn't punishing you. Life is reshaping you. And sometimes it has to break the outer structures so that your inner reality can finally emerge. Think of it like a psychological earthquake. The ego, your constructed identity, gets shaken. Everything you thought was secure becomes unstable. But beneath that shaking, the deeper self begins to stir. The self that was buried under roles, routines, and unconscious compromises. The self that had been waiting silently for a moment of disruption to speak. This is why a crisis can feel both terrifying and strangely liberating, because something deep inside knows the old life had run its course, and now something new is being born. We're conditioned to seek comfort, predictability, and control. So when crisis hits, we instinctively try to restore what was lost. But individuation doesn't move backward. It doesn't help you rebuild a version of yourself that no longer fits. It pushes you forward into the unknown, into the depths, into the places you've avoided. The crisis becomes a portal, and how you respond determines whether you shrink back into survival or step forward into transformation. The reason life crises are so powerful is that they dismantle the illusion of control, they humble the ego, and they force you to ask real questions. Who am I without this job, this partner, this image? What have I been ignoring inside myself? What part of me have I sacrificed just to maintain stability? In that raw, broken moment, there's a rare opportunity to hear the voice of the true self, because all the noise of performance has gone silent. And what you'll often find is that the crisis is not random, it's precise. It hits you exactly where you were living out of alignment. If you were hiding your truth in a relationship, it crumbles. If you were compromising your soul in a job, you burn out. If you were projecting strength while silently drowning, the mask falls off. The crisis is not an accident, it's a mirror, and what it reflects is what you must face if you want to become whole. But here's the deeper truth. The crisis doesn't reveal something new. It reveals what was always there but buried. The wounds, the suppressed desires, the unlived parts of your psyche. They rise to the surface during breakdowns because your defenses finally collapse. And in that moment, if you have the courage to stay with it, to feel it, to not numb out or run, you can retrieve parts of your soul that have been missing for years. This is why Jung said that individuation requires suffering, not as punishment, but as purification. It is in the fire of crisis that the gold of the psyche is forged. You begin to shed old layers of identity. You begin to remember parts of yourself that were lost, and you begin to live from a deeper center, not the fragile ego but the enduring self that has watched everything fall and still stands. Of course, this isn't easy. The process can be disorienting, painful, lonely. Friends might not understand. Family may try to pull you back into the familiar. But if you listen to the inner voice, not the voice of fear but the quiet one underneath that says keep going, you'll find that what you thought was the end was actually a beginning. Every life crisis is a sacred interruption. It breaks the trance, it makes you conscious, and the more conscious you become, the more you see that these moments are not setbacks but initiations. You were not meant to live in a fixed identity, you were meant to evolve, and evolution requires rupture. So when life cracks you open, don't rush to fix it. Sit in the ashes, listen to what your soul is saying beneath the noise. Ask yourself what this pain is trying to teach, and trust that the self emerging from this darkness is more real, more alive, and more aligned than anything you were before. Because the truth is, you don't find yourself when life is easy. You find yourself when life breaks you open and says, now choose, comfort or growth, illusion or truth, ego or soul. The path you choose in that moment will shape not only who you become, but how free you'll finally be. We are taught to seek consistency, clarity, and coherence in our identity, but the truth of the psyche is far more complex. You are not one thing. You are a symphony of opposites, a landscape filled with contradictions that refuse to neatly resolve. And wholeness doesn't come from silencing those contradictions. It comes from embracing them. Wholeness means allowing the light and the dark to coexist, the rational and the irrational, the lover and the warrior, the child and the elder within the same psyche. Not one or the other, but both. But most people spend their entire lives rejecting parts of themselves they've deemed unacceptable. Maybe you were told you're too emotional, so you buried your feelings. Maybe you were taught to always be polite, so you repressed your anger. Or maybe you've clung to strength so tightly that you've lost touch with your vulnerability. These splits don't go away, they go underground. They become shadows, disowned parts of you that continue to influence your behavior from the dark. And until you face them, you remain fragmented. Outwardly successful maybe, but inwardly divided. To embrace internal contradictions is to stop demanding that your psyche be simple or linear. The soul is not a math equation, it's a paradox. You can be brave and afraid. You can feel deep love and also harbor resentment. You can be nurturing and fierce, spiritual and messy, grounded and lost. And when you stop trying to eliminate the contradiction and instead learn to hold it, something profound happens. You expand. You become more whole, Not because you've figured yourself out, but because you've stopped fighting who you are. Carl Jung said, "I'd rather be whole than good." Most people try to be good by cutting off parts of themselves. They try to be the nice one, the strong one, the smart one, but in doing so they exile the rest. They become personas, masks, and over time the cost of maintaining that one-dimensional self becomes unbearable. Depression, anxiety, fatigue, and emptiness are often the signals that your psyche is tired of performing. It's craving integration. It's craving wholeness. To move toward wholeness, you must welcome the parts of yourself you've rejected. That doesn't mean acting out every impulse, but it does mean listening, understanding, making space. If there's a part of you that feels rage, you don't have to unleash it, but you do have to ask what it's protecting. If there's a part of you that feels lost, you don't have to panic. You can sit with it, learn from it, and allow it to exist without rushing to fix it. Integration is not about resolution, it's about relationship. It's learning to be in conscious relationship with the many selves that live inside you. And this work is not abstract. It's intimate, gritty, and daily. It shows up in your relationships where you must hold both love and boundaries. It shows up in your career where ambition and self-care may collide. It shows up in your healing, where the desire to grow coexists with the fear of change. You'll never reach a point where all contradictions disappear. That's not the goal. The goal is to stop letting them tear you apart. Because when you embrace contradiction, you become less reactive. You stop needing others to validate only your good side. You can hear feedback without collapsing, feel shame without being consumed, face fear without running. You develop what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold tension between opposites long enough for a new, deeper understanding to emerge. That's where transformation lives, not in choosing sides, but in allowing the opposites to stretch you open until something new is born. Many spiritual seekers fall into the trap of bypassing contradiction. They want to be pure light, pure love, pure peace. But light without darkness is incomplete. Love without boundaries is self-destruction. Peace without truth is avoidance. The soul is not pure, it's total. And if you want to live from the soul, you must become big enough to hold the full spectrum of your humanity. This doesn't mean you become chaotic or uncentered. In fact, the more you integrate contradiction, the more centered you become, because your identity is no longer fragile. You don't have to defend a false self. You don't have to overcompensate. You don't have to lie to yourself. You can sit in your complexity without fear. Wholeness is not an endpoint. It's a way of being. It's a shift from either-or thinking to both-and awareness. It's looking in the mirror and seeing not a single identity but a vast, rich and contradictory self, fully alive, deeply human and forever unfolding. We often look at personal growth as if it has a finish line, a point where we'll finally arrive, where everything will make sense, where we'll be healed, whole and forever stable. But that's not how the psyche works. The deeper truth is the journey never ends. It deepens. Individuation, the process of becoming your full authentic self, is not a project you complete. It's a relationship you nurture. The more you grow, the more you realize how much more there is to meet within yourself. You are not a puzzle to be solved. You are a soul to be lived through, layer by layer. What begins as a quest to fix your pain eventually transforms into a devotion to knowing who you truly are. And this devotion doesn't demand speed. It demands presence. As you evolve, you don't become someone else, you become more you. But each layer of self-awareness brings with it new challenges, new contradictions, new truths to hold. What once looked like clarity gives way to deeper questions. What once felt like certainty now opens into mystery. And that's not regression, that's growth. The danger lies in expecting closure. Many people start this inner journey thinking that one day they'll be done. But that expectation creates suffering. When something unresolved resurfaces, an old trauma, a new insecurity, they believe they've failed. But the psyche doesn't work in straight lines, it spirals. You revisit the same themes but with more wisdom, more compassion, more inner space each time. Healing is not linear, and wholeness is not static. It breathes, it expands, it contracts, and it always asks you to go deeper. If you accept this truth that the journey never ends, you stop chasing perfection. You stop performing self-growth. You stop measuring yourself against some invisible ideal. Instead, you begin to walk with yourself, not ahead of yourself. You start listening to your rhythms instead of forcing transformation. You make space for confusion, for not knowing, for unraveling. Because in that unraveling, something new always emerges. This is where real strength is born. Not in how complete you look from the outside, but in how intimately you stay with yourself when things fall apart again. It's easy to feel spiritual when everything's going well. It's another thing entirely to remain rooted when your identity cracks open and reveals another hidden layer. But those cracks aren't signs of failure, they are invitations. Invitations to explore even deeper dimensions of your soul that were previously unreachable. And there's no age limit to this. The journey deepens whether you're 20 or 70. There is always more to uncover, more unlived potential, more shadow to integrate, more love to allow, more pain to face, more mystery to embrace. Life will keep offering you mirrors through relationships, losses, dreams, synchronicities, and challenges, not because you're behind, but because you're alive. The work doesn't stop because life doesn't stop, and that's not a curse, it's the greatest gift. But this truth also requires a shift in values. In a culture obsessed with goals, metrics, and quick wins, the idea of an endless journey can feel disorienting. But that's only because we've been conditioned to believe that stillness equals failure. In reality, stillness often signals transformation. The deepest changes happen not when we're pushing, but when we're surrendering. When we stop demanding answers and start asking better questions. When we stop performing healing and start being with what is. If you can embrace the endless nature of your own unfolding, you become more grounded, not less. You develop patience, not as a virtue, but as a survival skill. You learn to walk slowly, to breathe through discomfort, to trust the timing of your psyche, and you start to recognize that every phase, every breakdown, every cycle has a sacred role in your evolution. Nothing is wasted, nothing is random, everything belongs. The journey never ends because your soul is infinite, and each experience, especially the difficult ones, is another step into that infinity. Instead of fearing the next layer, you begin to welcome it, not because it's easy but because it's real. Because the deeper you go, the more alive you become, the more honest, the more connected to your instincts, your intuition, your truth. Individuation is not a path toward perfection. It's a path toward participation, toward meeting life as it is, toward showing up to yourself again and again and again,